The Trump administration has used a couple of different sections or legislative pieces to justify the tariffs. And these reciprocal tariffs, so those are the ones that were, as you said, announced in April. They were the across the board applied to many countries, including Australia, at 10%. We're under this IEEPA Act, which is an emergency act. In the past, the U.S. administrations have used it to impose sanctions on, say, terrorist groups or countries that were considered in an emergency situation. Trump has used that act and argued that the trade deficits and the drug trade constitute a national emergency, and therefore these tariffs are necessary. And as you noted, the court has disagreed and said not so much they didn't really rule on the emergency, they really talked about his authority to implement tariffs under this act, and they said that's not allowed.
So what does this ruling mean then? Does it mean that all the tariffs now have to be lifted?
No, absolutely not, sadly. It means the retaliatory tariffs. So the 10% base, the other tariffs that he had, the 50% he was talking about imposing on the EU, the tariffs he's been imposing on China. These tariffs under the IEEPA Act will need to be removed within 10 days. That's what the court has ruled. The administration has said that they will appeal that, so that will go to the federal appeals process and likely again to the Supreme Court, but that'll take time. In the meantime, the tariffs imposed on things like aluminium and steel, on cars, on solar panels, on washing, different individual products that were imposed under what we call the Section 201, Section 301, and National Security Section 232, these will all remain in place.
Which affects Australia, because those were the exports that we mainly sent to the US.
Absolutely. And also there are investigations underway under these sections into copper and pharmaceutical products, which will further affect Australia. These investigations are expected to be sent to the president for recommendation later on this year, and we can expect some kind of tariffs to come out of those as well.
So, Susan, is this going to reassure the financial markets, or does it just signal more chaos?
Well, the IEEPA tariffs were imposed with little warning, imposed immediately, retracted immediately. It's lent a great deal of uncertainty and fluctuations in the market. If the court ruling stands that these are not going to be allowed and that it's these other section, as I said, Section 301, 201, and 232 tariffs, they require investigation. So they require a bit more time, a bit more forewarning that they're coming. And that, while it's not great for businesses, at least it gives them some opportunity to prepare. So we're hoping that if this ruling stands, that will help reduce some of the volatility and direct uncertainty that we've been facing for the last few months.
So if this ruling covers reciprocal tariffs, are there other legal challenges ongoing to other types of tariffs?
There are some legal challenges, but as I said, the other section tariffs, that's a different process. So they would have to be appealed through a different process. There are still some other IEEPA tariffs through different states or businesses that are also working their way through the courts. So, but it'll likely be the same kind of process that's currently in place, because they're really arguing the same background, that the president doesn't have the authority. And also, even if these tariffs are appropriate, if the country is even facing a national emergency, if you can call a trade deficit a national emergency, and then if the tariffs are appropriate for that. So there's all kinds of legal questions tied up with using this act.
And how are the tariffs playing out in the US itself, Susan? What's happening to prices? Are US consumers bearing the brunt? And also, how many companies have set up production hubs within the US, which is what the president wanted?
Right. There has been a lot of announcements taking place, but many of those announcements were made were plans that were put in place prior to the tariffs. So it's still unclear as to how much they are causing companies to really reevaluate. Many companies, yes, are facing tariffs. You're hearing many stories about small and medium-sized companies that had put in orders and now are facing tremendous tariff bills to get their products out of ports and being delivered and out of customs. This is having a big impact. We've seen companies like Walmart and Amazon already announce that they're going to be having price increases because of the tariffs. There's been some pushback on the White House by the White House saying that they shouldn't be increasing prices. That has led to some concerns about these companies increasing prices outside the US to try to maintain profit margins. So these tariffs may even have implications for prices in third markets, such as Australia or the European Union or other markets. So we have seen price increases. The Fed has indicated that they're concerned about policy leading to price increases and what that may mean for inflation and the ability for the Fed to continue to lower interest rates. So there's still a lot of uncertainty in the market for sure.